That was Chloe 3 hours. It's just okay. But Lisa said, like, come on.
The first Friday of March. That was Friday before. Austin knew my schedule. That. Bring it on.
So that would be pretty exciting. I mean, I would love that. But it's just, and they do
Time to get in. Oh, that you.
So it's a little of everything. And then he also says a class.
I'm sorry to disappoint you. Everybody apparently thinks that about you.
That's where the word of prayer.
Are you not going to wait for it to right?
All right, good morning. How are you guys? Happy Mother's Day to all the mothers out there. I'm sure it'll get said several more times. I have a whole lesson prepared as well. I have been teaching the young adults class, I think since I've been here, if not shortly after. So let me acclimate a little bit before you cast judgment. If I ask you some super simple, silly questions, just know that it's been a hot minute. But I'm very, very excited about this study. Specifically, the first 10, 11, 12 chapters of Genesis is probably up there in my top 5 for just study and recognizing God's supremacy and things. So before we start, I've asked Mike to open us with a word of prayer.
Pray with me. Heavenly Father, we come here today, study your word, to have our study on Genesis. Be with us as we go through this so we can really deep dive into your words and the subject matter that we're going to be talking about today. Be with all of us. Bless the mothers on Mother's Day. And everybody, for the whole service and people that are going to be involved in it and meet with them. It is in Jesus' name that we say this. Amen.
Amen. All right. Before we get started, Don, are you ready, or do I need to fill some time here? I'm a big fan of Bible Project summaries, and the one on Genesis goes through the first 11 chapters is actually one of my favorites that they do. Once again, the book of Genesis had just, it is foundational, right? It sets everything up for our existence, for the fall, for the redemption, and some of the things that even after multiple times of studying Genesis just pop again as you go through them. So we're gonna watch this. It's about 8 minutes. I think it's a great intro. It's gonna do a lot better job than me. And then we're gonna dive into chapter 1.
It's the first book of the Bible, and its storyline divides into two main parts. There's chapters 1 through 11, which tell the story of God and the whole. And then there's chapters 12 through 50, which zoom in and tell the story of God and just one man, Abraham, and his family. And these two parts are connected by a hinge story at the beginning of chapter 12. And this design gives us a clue to how to understand the message of the book as a whole and how it introduces the story of the whole Bible. So the book begins with God taking the disorder and the darkness described in the second sentence of the Bible, and God brings out of it order and beauty.
That's all you get. All right. If that's true, then that's okay. We'll give it another couple seconds here. Is that all we get? We'll keep moving. I tell you what, someone or maybe several of you, give me what you remember most about the beginning of Genesis. When's the last time you studied Genesis? Been a minute? Okay. Been a minute for me too. But for me, obviously, it's the story of the garden. But maybe some of the other stuff that you guys recall most about the first half of Genesis.
The foundation of life, the foundation of marriage, family.
Okay. It is very interesting when you think about marriage and children is the cornerstone of civilization. Everything flows from that. Your concept of authority, your concept of social interaction all start with the family. It's the bedrock. I don't think people give it that much credit, but that's the bedrock. That's where it all begins. Very good. Yeah?
I thought, years ago, and I still think this way now, how could anybody that's not a believer read Genesis and the creation of the world and not be one? Mm-hmm. All that stuff is so perfect. It is so detailed. You read that, you can't help but say, God created everything.
I like that, and I think it's so interesting to go back and look at the language used in the beginning and go, oh my goodness, that stuff was known long before. We talk about the redemption seed and how the video kind of talks about the bruised victor. Like all the way back then, God knew. He knew how this would play out. There's a couple of other things that I caught even in preparing for this and preparing for lesson, how it talks about, we'll talk about this in the lesson this morning, about
the first book of the Bible,
how childbirth was going to go,
into two
even
main
before they
parts.
had kids,
There's
and a
chapters
recognition
1 through 11,
that that's how
which tell the story
life
of God and the whole
propagated.
world. And then there's chapters 12 through 50, which zoom in and tell the story of God and just one man, Abraham, and then his family. And these two parts are connected by a hinge story at the beginning of chapter 12. And this design, it gives us a clue to how to understand the message of the book as a whole and how it introduces the story of the whole Bible. So the book begins with God taking the disorder and the darkness described in the second sentence of the Bible, and God brings out of it order and beauty and goodness. He makes a world.
And I remember one of them was specifically some type of sea creature that lives so deep in the ocean that they've never been found before. But once they discovered them, they found out there was a use for it that benefited man. So I'm thinking there's so much that we don't even know yet.
That's really incredible. As you think about even just the garden, right, and being set up in the garden and working on behalf of God, and then everything that we need was created. Very, very good. I like that too. And I also think that the children's stories that come out of Genesis, absolutely. And I think that's why I think it still appeals to our adult minds on that level. It's abstract but obtainable, if that makes sense, right? The language is really, really great in kind of defining some of this. Yeah.
Stands out to me as power that God has to speak something into existence.
Yeah.
It's just like, really? How in the world? That is power.
Yes. That has been, I have been kind of chewing on that quite a bit lately, and it's really incredible. As we kind of go back through that, it'll be one of the things that I hope that we dive into a little bit. And the thing that I was always amazed by is what language was God using when he spoke these things? And it's a bit of a rhetorical question, but I think it's foundational to me to understand that language, communication, expression of will existed before we were created, right? And so that's a divine quality that we have. As many of you know, like my job is in AI. A lot of it is in AI. And I actually think that for me, it's a bit of faith-building exercise, because AI doesn't work. It operates on the principle of language. So I can say one phrase in English, and it has, obviously, there's equivalent phrases in German and French, but those are weighted different based on the cultural context. But the lowest common denominator is language must be present. That's how it operates. And to me, that's like, okay, this wouldn't have worked unless we didn't have a system. Some people call math a language, because we didn't invent math. We discovered it, and we put language to it. So I really like, yeah, go ahead.
Along with that power and his presence, I'm impressed with the obedience of elements and everything to his will.
Yes, yes, very good. In fact, with that, let's go ahead and read. Let's see here. There's so much here. I don't want to bite off a ton all at once. But Dawson, would you mind reading 1 through 13?
Sure. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was over the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. And God said, "Let there be light." There was light. And God saw that the light was good, and God separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening, and there was morning, the first day. And God said, "Let there be an expanse in the midst of the waters, and let it separate the waters from the waters." And God made the expanse and separated the waters that were under the expanse from the waters that were above the expanse. And it was so. And God called the expanse heaven. And there was evening, and there was morning the second day. And God said, "Let the waters under the heavens be gathered together into one place, and let the dry land appear," and it was so. God called the dry land earth, and the waters that were gathered together he called seas. And God saw that it was good. And God said, "Let the earth sprout vegetation, plants yielding seed, and fruit, trees bearing fruit, in which is their seed." each according to its kind, and on the earth. And it was so. The earth brought forth vegetation, plants yielding seed according to their own kinds, and trees bearing fruit in which is their seed, each according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the third day.
Thank you very much. We're going to keep rolling down through 25. Kevin, do you want to read 14 down through 25, please?
And God said, let there be lights in the expanse of the heaven to separate the day from the night. And let there be a sign, or be for signs, and for seasons, and for days and years. And let them be lights in the expanse of the heavens to give light upon the earth. And it was so. And God made the two great lights, the greater light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night. And the stars. And God set them in the expanse of the heavens to give light on the earth, to rule over the day and over the night, and to separate the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the fourth day. And God said, let the water swarm with swarms of living creatures, and let birds fly above the earth across the expanse of the heavens. So God created the great sea creatures and every living creature that moves, with which the water swarm, according to their kinds, and every winged bird according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. And God blessed them, saying, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters and the seas, and let birds multiply on the earth. And there was evening, and there was morning, the fifth day. God said, let the earth bring forth living creatures according to their kinds, living or livestock and creeping things and beasts on the earth according to their kinds. And it was so. And God made the beasts of the earth according to the kinds and to their kinds, and the livestock according to their kinds, and everything that creeps on the ground according to its kind. And God saw that it was good.
Okay. We're really familiar with this story, but I want to kind of point out, what do you notice about the language being used here? And it could be anything. I'm not necessarily looking for an answer, but there's a lot going on here. Yeah.
Very structured.
Very,
That's
yes.
This is not random.
Yes.
It makes me think of like growing up taking, if you get a science degree, you're surrounded by something totally different than what this says, you know. There was just this massive explosion and all of this randomly
Right.
took place. Like,
Right.
if I had the voice then that I have now, it's different, you know.
Yeah.
But then you're just quiet, and now it reminds me of a phrase. I mean, for sure I heard it, but I love when science catches up with God.
Oh, interesting. Absolutely. Yes.
Like something's
Yeah.
discovered, and you're like,
Yeah.
wow, that
It
was
was-
discovered, everyone.
Yeah, that kind of goes, Donna, with your point. Like everything that we had, and we're just discovering it. We're just uncovering it, if you will. That idea of structure to me was really, really apparent. And a few things, Lucy, I saw your hand, and then Mike. This idea of bringing order out of chaos, right? And this is, to me, like, this is appealing to me at the divine level. For me, like, my personal faith, this kind of bringing order out of nothingness or randomness or chaos is God's divine nature. And to your point, it's like he just begins to kind of assemble these things. And you had mentioned earlier how everything just obeys. Everything obeys his voice. Lucy?
I love the phrasing of according to their own kind. Kind of goes off of Paul's comment of everything's so organized, everything has a purpose.
And that's structured too, right? There's not a ton of surprises. Everything should kind of follow after its own kind. Yeah, very good.
It's structured and detailed, but it's also tested. You know,
Okay.
and there he says, and he saw it was good, you know, so it just
Yes.
wasn't created, it was tested that no changes needed to be made because it was perfect.
Very good, yes. Cole, and then Jason.
So, when we think about, one thing that's tough, I think, about the creation is just even the mindset, when we read in the beginning, like, we have to acknowledge that there was a before in the beginning, right? And so you have to go in with this mindset that we serve a God who is outside of space, matter, and
Yes,
time.
yes,
And that's
yes.
not how we're built. So that's tough, but then you look at all of this, right, and you go, all of this speaks to an intelligent mind that has put this in order. And so we just from a science perspective, you just go, okay, what if one of the planets just fell out of the order? Like, you think like catastrophic events, right? And so I think about in Jude when he was talking about like the angels that were held in the eternal chains because they had left their abode. The design of our lives mimics the order that God created. And it just goes to show when we leave our abode, when we fall out of that place, chaos and destruction happens.
Yeah.
And so it's like we can learn a lot from the design and order and go, this is how it was purposed, this is how it works in perfect unity and harmony. And when we fall outside of that, the bad things happen. We'll soon be looking at the fall of man and what that chaos looks like when we fall to sin. But yeah, we just, from a science perspective, yeah, you can just see everything. You go, this has to keep working. Just even in our bodies, right? You're just like, oh, well, if, you know, your heart doesn't work like it should, or if something happens, right? It's like we go down in a hurry. And so God is commanding all that to be perfectly in place, and that's what he expects of us.
Yeah, it's really, for me, when I think about peace, peace implies an order, right? And when things are ordered properly is when things are at peace. And in there, this idea here lately of, yeah, there's a desire to be with God. That's one thing. That's like the human reasoning, but it's my place to be with God is something, because that's order. That's where I belong. That is the station, of course, and I've left that, right? But the order there is, no, I belong with my Maker. I belong in his presence. That's what he set up, and I walked away from that. That's, I really agree, and that's kind of like, how do you tell a story like this? And this is really why I want to point out this language. How do you tell a story about before time was, and how this all fits into place? And we do it really rapid fashion. How are you supposed to do that in a way that's meaningful to listeners forever? I think it's an excellent job, Jace.
Yeah, I was just thinking, Alex Worth was talking about kind of the way that science explains things, and like, well, we can't explain like what happened to begin with, but then like, you know, evolution happened, everything would just naturally, like this domino effect falling down to the way it's presented. But then like just reading the way at least the study book has it is, and God said, 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 where it's like, no, this didn't just like happen. It was God willed every intentionally every step along the way willed, this is what's going to happen, and this happens, and this happens. And there's such an intentionality to it. And then I think Cole spoke a little bit with me. But in Romans 1, where it talks about like all creation, right, being a testament or being glorifying to God, and that we can reject that, but like there's a clear, and there are Christians who dive really deep into the sciences, and they go, no, like this, if you actually look at it, this all points to him. Like it's hard to not have, if you actually look at it objectively, it's hard to look at the data and the science that are there and not come to the conclusion that all of that is true.
Yeah, I like Romans 1 as well, because Paul, based on the natural order, makes conclusions from that order about how God wanted things. And we can do the same because God said, God willed. This is my desire. Yes. Boomy, did you have your hand up? Or okay. So another thing that I noticed was just the subtlety of language being used. I mean, once again, how do you tell this story without going into, I remember, and I'm not going to take credit for this, But look at one in verse 16. God made two great lights, the greater light to rule over the day and the lesser light to rule over the night. He made the stars also. You're outside and you're looking up. Wow, the night sky is beautiful. These twinkling stars, these little pinpricks of light. And Jace and Holly, as you uncover, what did it take to get those lights in our view? These things are massive exploding balls of radiation, hundreds of millions of miles apart. And we're like, wow, that's beautiful, right? Our Milky Way galaxy contains roughly 100 to 400 billion stars. There are currently hundreds of billions to about 2 trillion galaxies. Our mind cannot reach the end of this. And he made the stars also, right? It's almost comical when you think about, and maybe you've read some of the things about some of the mega black holes that are just like can swallow multiple galaxies at a time and stuff like that. And I'm sure, right, like we don't have all of that right, but for sure, like we know that this is just beyond our limit to comprehend. It's so vast. I was watching this thing about like we kind of measure in speeds of light, you know, in light years and that kind of thing, and it is physically impossible to reach that speed. And so while we use that, we're like, sure, it'll take 100 light, yeah, but you still can't even really go that fast. It was very interesting because it's like if you imagine an airplane and you want to go faster, what do you need? You need more fuel. Well, there's a cost to adding fuel, so you'll just never really get to the point where you can travel that fast. And so I love the subtlety of language here in a way that invites the user to just think about all of this, especially as we uncover and discover new things. It all should point back to the glory of God. And it's almost hilarious to me to look at the scientific industry and like, we always have the right answer. And I don't know that that's across the board, but it certainly feels that way. And then years later, like, yeah, James Webb Telescope totally destroyed all of our models about it. It's like, we just keep being wrong. Like, it would be nice if there was some intellectual honesty to go, we have no idea, but we're discovering it, right? And so this just keeps pointing back to that order, that structure that God put in place. Yeah, Jace.
So just that reminded me, everything you're laying out, right? Like the James Webb Telescope now collapses what was before, and just like the word that comes to mind is foundation, right? It's like, what is your foundation? Because
right.
It's the current understanding of science. It's your foundation is based on when you're born, and based on what scientific is. And then when that crumbles, like what are you left with? Like you have no foundation to rely upon. Whereas if you do have a foundation to rely upon, like whenever things happen, you're like, okay, well that's kind of predictable, right? Like that seemed a little bit wrong, and now we're pointing more in the right direction, or vice versa.
It is very interesting, and like we should kind of laugh at ourselves a little bit. Once again, I wish there was a little bit of intellectual honesty there. And like, for example, the table of the elements, we discovered all their properties in this environment. But you go to another planet and they act totally different, right? Because we found it here in our backyard, and we're like, we're so smart. But we keep making new discoveries, yeah.
And I think it's interesting that science keeps collapsing and that was wrong, but here's a new thing. But within the Bible, that's never changed. Like this has always been the same
right.
for thousands of years. But within science, it's no, that was wrong. Here's the next new thing.
Yes, absolutely. And just chasing what they consider truth. Cool.
I think one of the things that it can be in such a scary way to think about this, but when you look at the order that God just breathes into place, it makes me feel so inferior and helpless. Because when you just look at his power, I mean, whether that's, hey, if this happens, the tides will rise and will swallow up the whole, and it's like, and there's nothing we can do about it. So how many times do we play God where we're just like, oh, just plug in your appliance 2 times less in a day and we'll save the world. It's like, how foolish are we to
Yeah.
think that we
Yeah.
can make that kind of
Yeah.
impact? That doesn't mean don't be a good steward,
Right.
right?
Right.
But we try to place like we can control the outcome and save the world, and we are helpless. We can't even stop the wind
Yeah.
from
Yeah.
blowing.
Yeah.
You know, and it's just like if something fell, you know, from the skies, and we're done, and there's nothing that we could do about it. And so it's like that makes you feel helpless if you don't focus on the rest of God's plan.
Yes, and if you don't recognize him as the source of that order and follow that source of the order, because as Jace kind of mentioned there in Romans 1, like once you detach yourself from that, you're walking away from the only source of order and life, right? And you're just like, sure, I can handle that, right? Well, we see very, very quickly what happens. Another thing that I noticed is that God is naming things as he's going on. I'm going to call this that. I'm going to call this that. What is that? Why do you think that was included in this story?
We name things that are important to us, like.
Very good. Yes. Yes, we name things that are important. We give them, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit in my sermon this morning. It's such an interesting concept. It's like, I'm going to call this that. In my mind, it's representative or indicative of that order as he puts things in place, and he's like, I'm going to call you day because you belong here, right? There is this almost personification. And in a way, as we think about the elements obeying God, they have an identity too. And when Paul is like, I can now make conclusions based on the order that I see in natural things, because that is all the mind of God. And this like, in Romans 1, it's like, doesn't take too much to look at a man and look at a woman and go, those things fit, right? Like, that just makes sense. And Paul's like, yeah, you leave that order, you're asking for chaos, right? Like, it's so apparent that a man and woman go together that you walk away from that order and you're inviting chaos. You're leaving the structure, which I think is really, really cool.
As he's creating and developing life, he says that then they yielded according to their kind.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it tells you right there, one thing, not more than another.
Right. Yeah, I often think about like when evolution, they talk about, some of the biggest evidence is like, well, yeah, I mean, you can see macro, or rather micro evolution, like things are made to adapt for sure. But when we talk about a single-celled organism to the next jump, it's like this chasm. And they're like, yeah, but it's just one step.
You get down and not look back
Yeah.
far into science. It's like, yeah, we all have the same creator. We have same elements within
Mhm.
every living being. But those are all organized differently according to the master.
Yes. Yeah, I remember I found this concept in a very strange place. I was reading a programming book many years ago. It was object-oriented programming. And as a comparison, they said, look at the cell. Cell is God's economy of scale. It's the Lego blocks, right? Because the cell can be a plant, it can be, and I thought, oh wow, this is really interesting. Number one, you don't often see that in the programming like community. But it had taken a really cool concept and said, yeah, this is how God designed everything to function and order. All of this reminds me of Proverbs 3:19. By wisdom the Lord laid the foundation of the earth. He established the heavens by understanding. By his knowledge the primordial sea was broken apart so that the clouds dripped down dew. And someone was probably watching and going, what does it rain? What are clouds? Right? And it's like maybe they started to see this cycle in their mind. It's like, oh, interesting, right? Like we have water that kind of goes up into the air and comes back down. And it's this kind of repeating cycle. And God has set in motion all of these cycles, if you will. Okay. Why do you think that the Bible began with creation? creation rather than the story of Abraham, Moses, or even the problem of sin. Yeah.
You have to establish whose authority on this.
Okay.
Done by, but you're not in charge.
Yes. I mean, it is the telling of the story, and the story is God was here before we were here, and it shows his power, it shows his authority. I really like the idea of being able to see what life was like in his presence before this very foundational root of problem where it's like, oh no, we want to go our own way, right? And what inevitably happens from that. So getting to kind of see what it was originally like, right? And the way that it was ordered and structure and work, we talk about work was a part of that, and garden tending was a part of that, but being in his presence was part of that. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more in detail. Very good.
Interesting.
Yes.
The concept of Jesus is not really mentioned here. And when we read John's account, Jesus was the Word was God, in the beginning with God.
Right.
And the other interesting part about that is there in verse 2, the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. So obviously the Spirit was there according to this passage.
Yes.
And then we find out later that the Word was God. His Word made everything happen, just as it did in New Testament times. His Word is still making things happen. It is in control. This is the way of life.
Because of that, I'm going to have you read 26, because this dovetails perfectly into this concept of Jesus and the Spirit, God the Father. So go ahead and read 26 down through 31 for me.
26 through 31?
Yes.
Then God said, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over the livestock, and over the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth." So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. And God blessed them. And God said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over every living thing that moves on the earth." And God said, "Behold, I have given you every plant yielding seed that is on the face of all the earth, and in every tree with seed in its fruit. You shall have them for food. And to every beast of the earth, and to every bird of the heavens, and to everything that creeps on the earth, everything that has the breath of life, I have given every green plant for food." And it was so. And God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the sixth day.
Okay. Thank you. There's just so much here. We could probably spend several classes on this, but the first thing that sticks out to me is "let us," right? Like, I was pretty young when I was like, wait, what? What does that mean? This is like, did someone like mistranslate this or something? But no, it continues, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness, so that they may rule." And there's a couple of things here. I mean, we could spend an entire class talking about being image bearers. And I personally need to often remind myself, remember, at least my dad and my parents did this, you're walking out there, remember who you are. And I think at that time they were like, you're a member of our family. And I think the extension of that is you are the image bearer. You were not meant to walk away from God. You were not meant to be out of the garden. You were not meant to fall away. You were meant to be in his presence, work alongside him. You were his creation. And I think that that's so this let us make mankind in our image, the Spirit, the Father, and Jesus were here, present for this. And when they went to define the image, they were like, we're going to make humans in our image. And why was that in verse 26? Or at least what's an implied purpose there in 26? We should have, yes. Now, that, I feel far away from that, to be honest. And maybe it's like modern life and modern culture, but I think that there's something here. And what this reminds me of, and we'll talk about it later, is when there's a couple of things that for me stick out here. When Cain was about to kill Abel, how did God try to convince him? Do you guys remember? Sin is crouching at the door, and its desire is for you. But you should rule over it. You should have dominion over it. And there's this idea that we bear an image of authority in God as well. And I heard I was watching a really good video, the same guy, a wise disciple, who was talking about this and trying to get people to think about sin, like when Paul says sin doesn't reign in your body anymore. It's not in control. And there is this sense in which you now should rule over that. Does it still have influence? Absolutely. But is it your master? And are you a slave to it? Absolutely not. No, sin does not reign in your body. Even when you fail and you mess up, it is not your master. You belong to another. And so I thought that this was really interesting. It's something that I didn't pay attention to a lot in studying it. But there was an idea of, I made you in my image, and that comes with some responsibility and some authority and some dominion and some sovereignty, which I thought was just really, and I feel like if you start recognizing that more, it changes your behavior, it changes your attitude, right? Like what happens when you're given more responsibility? If you're self-aware, you try to take that very seriously and give it the weight that it deserves. What else did you guys see here?
Building off your comment on authority, we also have to remember that since it is God-given authority over the land He has given us, we are also a reflection of Him through our, like, how we take advantage of the authority, and how we use it as directly reflecting His power since it's God's given.
What happens when we use the authority for ourselves? What's like the natural progression? I'm reminded of, this stuck out in my head so much in our study of John. When Jesus recognized that the Father had handed him all things into his control, what did he do? What was the result? I mean, that verse follows right after he washes the disciples' feet. Insane to me. It was like that recognition of gaining that authority, humans like natural desires, like, cool, I get all this for me. And that's the exact wrong thing. That's the exact thing that takes you away from the order and into chaos. And Jesus demonstrates that so beautifully. The moment that he realized everything was put under his control and put in his hands, he goes to serve. He used that authority to sacrifice, to serve, to teach. Ooh, it's a gut punch. When you see what he does, it's like our instinct is to just hoard authority for ourselves. Yeah.
To your point there, when Jesus was tempted by Satan, that's what Satan was trying to give him.
Yes,
was
yes,
that very thing
yes.
that human nature
Yes.
was to take on, rather than what Jesus really.
That's so interesting because it makes me think, he's like, oh, he's human now. Do I have a prying point, right? Can I can I break this at this particular weakness, right? Because of course he has seen. In fact, he has propagated the idea that humans take all of this power for themselves. Very good. I hadn't thought of that. Yeah.
Shifting a little bit, not on the image conversation, but just asking what stood out. In verse 30, when it says everything that has the breath of life, just all the imagery it conjures there, like thinking about making man from the dust, right? And it's like, it's not the material components that are important here. It's that I gave
Yes.
life. God gave
Yes.
life in that.
Yeah.
And it's one of those, like, talking about science, evolution, everything, about like looking at how DNA works, looking at how like all the amino acids fit together. And if you change even little bits, you get cancer, you get death,
Yes.
you get decay. If you don't have the breath of life from God, it's like putting all that together.
Yeah. I struggle with remembering that often, because I do like, there's this line where you got to draw. It's like, well, you're responsible for taking care of your body, and so if I don't, like, if I feel like I'm failing and that kind of thing. But also, the breath of God resides in you, keeping all things in motion. The other thing that stood out to me is I love when it says, and it was very good. Right, as he made this. I mean, yeah, you can say, oh, there's some pride in craftsmanship and that kind of thing. And I do think that that's part of making things, is to refine until you're like, this is how I want it. This is good. But what else it shows me is that God is the author of what is good. He gets to say what this is right. This is in order. This is not in order. This makes for peace. This makes for chaos. And so all of these things, as he fashioned and put them together, this is how I want it, right? Like, what is good is what God wants. That is what we call good. We think that there's this moral kind of thing that's just out there. No, all of that started with God going, that's good. That's how I want it. He is supreme. And what he says is good is what we say is good.
It's not like I will make something on the farm for use, for
Right.
working with, whatever. And constantly it's like, well, it's not perfect, but it'll do the job.
Yeah.
You didn't hear that, I've got it.
Yes.
No, it's perfect.
Yes.
It is what I wanted, and this is exactly
Yes.
what I want.
Yes.
It's perfect.
And we get to exist in that. So, all right. We will continue on in, I think we'll probably spend a little bit more time in chapter 1, and then we'll hit the first part of chapter 2. So thank you, guys.